boy.
So the Free Soil Party campaigns free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men.
Wait.
Ladies couldn't vote, they didn't care.
Wait. So they're saying free labor is in slavery, right?
I would assume so.
And then the next word they say is free men.
Yeah,
Is
there
that
you
a
go.
joke?
Nice, think about that.
Oh, the Constitution.
Well, it must have been a joke because the Free Soil Party failed to carry any state. But they did have an impact on the election. They didn't carry any state. I'm going to give you an example. Go to new politics here, because this is what happens in 1848, and it happened when Bill Clinton was elected president, defeating George H. Bush in that presidential election. Who jumped into that race? Anybody remember? You're too young. Ever heard of a guy named Ross Perot? Ross Perot was a billionaire from Texas, and he ran on the Independent Party the same time that George H. Bush was running for re-election, and Bill Clinton from Arkansas was running for the presidency, and nobody had one idea who Bill Clinton was. The problem was, people that liked Ross Perot and voted for him in this election were Republicans. So George H. Bush lost a lot of Republican vote to Ross Perot, even though Ross Perot didn't win a single state. It gave Bill Clinton more votes, and he became president in an upset victory. Now that, because everybody in the world thought that George H. Bush would be an easy re-election. It was embarrassing to him beyond belief that he wasn't re-elected. If you run for re-election and you don't get re-elected, that's embarrassing. And only reason Bill Clinton became president for his first term was because Ross Perot got in this race and took the Republican vote from Bush. This was kind of the opposite. The Free Soil Party and Martin Van Buren took Democratic votes away from Lewis Cass, which gave the Whig candidate Zachary Taylor enough electoral votes to be named the nation's 12th president. A guy that knew absolutely nothing about politics is going to be the 12th president of the United States. Here he is right here. Okay? Now, he didn't claim to be a big politician either. Matter of fact, did you think he really thought he'd win? Okay. Anyway, that'll take us to another subtopic then, which is another crisis calling for compromise. We're going to see all kinds of compromises here. We've already had the Missouri Compromise of 1820. We're going to have another compromise of 1850. But we're going to have a compromise before that. So it's all going to issue around what? Slavery. Okay? There were four what you might consider unsettling issues that were going on across the country that irritated both Northerners and Southerners. Okay? There were four unsettling issues that were going on around the United States at this time that were very controversial and upset both Northerners and Southerners. And I'm going to give you these four unsettling issues that were going on around the country. By the way, what's the score in the free versus slave states right now? Even. Okay? Well, the first unsettling issue was that California had applied for admission into the Union, and they wanted to come in as a free state. So this is the first unsettling issue. California had applied for admission into the Union as a free state. Who is this going to upset? Southerners, because it's going to upset the balance of free and slave state in the Senate. So that's the first unsettling thing that's happening. And who's that got upset? Southerners. Okay? The second unsettling issue, the issue of slavery in the Mexican territory remained unsettled. The slavery issue in the Mexican territory had remained unsettled. Who does that upset? Both. Okay? So number one, California applied for admission to the Union as a free state, upset Southerners. Two, the issue of slavery in the Mexican territory remained unsettled, upset both sides, because they both wanted an answer to that, right?
So Texas hasn't been decided yet?
Well, Texas really, that was a fight for defense, that really wasn't land claimed. Does that make sense? The land claimed was the New Mexico Territory, California, etc. Okay, the third unsettling issue is that the North supported a law that would abolish slavery in the District of Columbia, which was what? Washington, D.C. So Northerners were supporting a law that would abolish slavery in Washington, D.C. Who would that upset? Southerners. So there's your third unsettling issue that was going on in the United States. That was that of the North supporting a law that would abolish slavery in the District of Columbia, upsetting Southerners. Number 4, Southerners were requesting a more effective fugitive slave law in the North. Southerners were supporting and requesting more effective fugitive slave laws in the North. What's a fugitive slave law? Okay, so what? So if a runaway slave goes up into Boston, Massachusetts, by law, that slave, if caught, has to be what? Returned back to the slave owner. Well, who did that upset? That the South was looking for a more effective fugitive slave law. Who does that upset? The North. So you've got these parties, Northerners and Southerners, still upset about all these unsettling issues. California coming in as a free state. Issue of slavery in Mexico not being settled. The South wanting to support legislation that would abolish slavery in the nation's capital. And the Southerners wanting a more effective fugitive slave law. All these things are going on, and it's upsetting both sides. They're all loaded with what we call political dynamite. So, in order to settle these problems, we have to have another compromise. And this compromise is going to go down in history as what? The Compromise of 1850. Somebody's going to have to sit down and get these issues settled before we have a civil war. Now, who's going to be the guy that sits down and puts together these compromises? None other than the great compromiser, Henry Clay. Thus the name. So Henry Clay, the great compromiser, is going to have to sit down and get this figured out. He comes on upon the scene. At this point, he's ill, he's weary. He's devoted his life to the Union, hadn't had much success in political arenas, but he's been very involved. And he stands before the Senate for his last plea as a politician to try to get these issues settled so we don't have conflict between North and South. And Clay's compromise will go down in American history and still is in American history as the Compromise of 1850. So when you hear the Compromise of 1850, and there might be a question on that in the AP exam, I'm thinking there could be. Who's the man that masterminded it? Whose plan was it? None other than the guy we pick on all the time because he can't win an election, Henry Clay. But he was a great politician and obviously the great compromise. Okay, here was his compromise to get all these things straightened out. Number 1. What's our first issue that's unsettled? Admit California into the Union as a free state. That was his stand on this compromise. He's going to address all these issues. Admit California in as a free state. He's not going to get them all, but he's going to get most of them. What's our next issue? What?
Slavery.
Yeah. He said, let's organize the land that was acquired from Mexico, except California, because we just admitted it into the Union, or we're going to, as a state. So take all the other land, other than California, that we received as a result of the Mexican War, and let the people decide on slavery by popular sovereignty. And what is popular sovereignty? How about David Wilmot's suggestion? No, that wasn't his. He opposed it. How about Stephen Douglas and Lewis Cass's suggestion way back. What'd he say? Yeah, popular sovereignty is allowing the people that reside in the territory to decide. So the second part of the Compromise of 1850 by Henry Clay was, let's organize that land that we acquired from Mexico, except for California, because we're going to admit it and it's a free state, and let the people living in the territories decide slavery by popular sovereignty. Let them decide by popular vote. Okay, that was the next part of it. The third thing he said, who had some claims on the territory of New Mexico? That's a state right now. Who claimed part of New Mexico? Texas. There was a little bit of a conflict because Texas said, wait a minute, we're in here as a state, but we're claiming some of this land too. Well, that isn't going to work. We can't have Texas, the whole thing, take the whole Southwest. So what Clay stated was, let's give $10 million to Texas out of the federal treasury if they'll agree to abandon all claims of any territory in New Mexico. So we're going to give Texas $10 million. And in return for that $10 million, they're going to say, hey, New Mexico's not ours. Do with it what you wish. What's the next thing we got to solve?
The slavery laws.
What?
The slavery laws.
In D.C. Clay stated, we're going to abolish the buying and selling of slaves in the District of Columbia. The fourth part of his compromise is we're going to abolish the buying and selling of slaves in the District of Columbia. What's that mean, Molitor? Means you can't do what? Yeah, but does it say you can't have them? No. So his compromise stated there'd be no more buying or selling slaves in the District of Columbia, but that did not abolish slavery in the district. Okay, you can't buy and sell them, but you can have them.
So could you bring them in, buy them to us?
Well, we'll talk, keep that thought in mind, okay? And the fifth thing is everybody agreed to have a more effective what? Fugitive slave law. So this was the compromise that Henry Clay threw on the table. Admit California into the Union as a free state. 1. 2. Organize the land we got from Mexico with the exception of California and let the people in each territory decide by popular sovereignty whether they were going to have slavery. 3. We're going to give Texas $10 million to give up their claims on any territory in New Mexico. 4. We're going to abolish the buying and selling of slaves in the District of Columbia. But that doesn't mean you still can't have them there. And 5, we're going to put in a more effective fugitive slave law. And this slave law would state that if a slave was captured in the North, by law, that slave had to be returned back to its owner in the South. Now, for more than 6 months, this compromise was debated in Congress. For more than 6 months. So this didn't happen overnight. This compromise that Clay gave to the Union was debated for more than 6 months. Well, in September of 1850, both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate, adopted all of Clay's compromises by large majorities. Everybody wanted compromise. Nobody wanted hassles at this time. So Henry Clay, one we've been a little critical of, his compromise of 1850 again saves the day for the United States and probably keeps us from the major conflict between North and South in 1850. We're eventually going to get there because of events we're going to talk about, but at least he saved the day that day. Okay, then tomorrow we're going to talk about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and we're going to talk about bleeding Kansas and the Dred Scott decision, all that have to do with slavery, okay? We're trying to stay in a conflict, but it's gonna be hard to do.